And right now by one of the greatest NFL insiders of all time, Braddock's own, the great John Clayton, the professor, back on 93.7 The Fan. John, we've swapped out Mueller for Bob Pompiani. Are you familiar with Bob's work?
Yeah, very well, yeah.
Oh, John, he's one of the best, has been for years, and, man, he's taken the next level going into the podcast, does all that stuff. In fact, I remember being at an owners meeting once in Arizona, and he gave me the lowdown on how to do this stuff.
Wow.
Remember that, John?
So now what is Bob doing?
TV.
He's doing the podcast?
No, I said we did one here, Poni and I. Then
yeah.
It kind of.
Oh, okay.
But I remember you told me, you were showing me all these things you did.
You were a trailblazer, John.
Right.
Oh, I mean, Bob's been fantastic for so many years. So many years.
Agreed.
I've had the greatest respect for him. I mean, again, he's one of the best in Pittsburgh, and so happy. It's like watching him when he's doing the stuff on Sundays and everything else. I'm so happy the way his career has gone.
Wow, Bob, how about that?
So John and I go way back, but also there was we had an opportunity to do something at Point Park University not too long ago, where a lot of people showed up to see him. Because they're all diehard football fans and want information. Mm-hmm. That was fun. It
really was. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Maybe we should. Yeah.
Could I tag along?
Yes.
Thank you.
Of course.
John, I appreciate that. Well, let's get with what I brought up in the headline there, John. I am really praying that the Steelers can bring back Mike Munchak as offensive line coach. We know you're familiar with the Broncos.
Yeah.
You study the league. What is the latest on Munchak's situation in Denver, and do you think he wants to keep coaching?
I think there's no doubt he wants to keep coaching. And I think getting Munchak is as good as you pairing up with Pompiani on something, if not better, because, again, Munchak is the absolute and complete best. I still remember talking to Vic Fangio at an owners meeting, and he had just hired Munchak like about a month or two before the owners meeting. And I says, well, I can tell you who's assistant coach of the year next year. And he looked at me and says, who? It's like Munchak, because he's that good. And so it's like, I would imagine it should be competitive, but I think that he liked it in Pittsburgh. He was a good, decent head coach, but he's a better offensive line coach. I mean, there should be no wait in getting this done. They need to pay him whatever it costs to get him, and get him in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, because mostly back when it happened, John, his desire was to be with his family out west. There wasn't anything here that had anything to do with the Steelers or him.
No bitterness, none of that.
So that should be a call, if they haven't made already, we'll make, and I imagine it would get done. John, I want to ask you about this quarterback situation. We seem to talk about it every single day. Now the Mobile, Alabama, the Senior Bowl is going on. A lot of coaches and the Steelers have been busy interviewing them. I know that's their job, but this year, does it take on even bigger emphasis, the fact that they're meeting with all of these quarterbacks?
It does. I mean, the only problem is going to be, and you'll appreciate this, Bob and Andrew, it's like I've never seen a time in a conference where there's this many good young quarterbacks. Like, for example, I counted up, you got 9 quarterbacks who are 26 years old or younger, right, that are really promising, good, and are going to get real good. I mean, you can go back. I mean, the most saturated time, I thought maybe, you go back to 83 with Elway and Marino and all that stuff. You can go back to the early 2000s with Manning, Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, all those different things. But you think 9 quarterbacks right now to be able to do it, and then the likelihood that Aaron Rodgers is going to probably come over to Denver. It's going to take time. And you look at the quarterbacks in this draft. It's like it may take a couple of drafts to be able to get the quarterback situation right, to be able to stay up with the rest of the AFC. But I think that that's probably the way they have to go, unless they want to go with Jimmy Garoppolo or one guy that doesn't ever get mentioned is Marcus Mariota. So he could be a possibility too, because he is mobile, he is talented, he was a top pick toward the top pick of a draft. I mean, he could be a possibility too. But the quarterback situation is so important, as everybody knows. This is a quarterback-driven league.
The great John Clayton is our guest, and before I ask you more questions about some of those quarterbacks, I will point out, and Bob knows this well, I'm not sure some of our younger listeners know this, but Dan Rooney was very impressed with John's pitch to get Dan Marino to the Steelers. Did you know that,
yes,
Bob?
Yes, absolutely. I
and
remember.
Dan sat down with Noel and said, we got to use the John Clayton plan. I mean, John, that is a great thing. I would have put that on a masthead or put that on a business card. You went on to do great things, but Dan Rooney thought so much of you that he took your idea to the coach. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, this goes back as, and Bob knows this. It's like, I actually covered high school games with Marino. High school games.
Wow.
At Central. With Dan Marino.
He was unbelievable.
And it's like, how can you not go for him? I don't care about whatever off the field thing or anything else. And the story was so wrong. I don't want to get into too many of the particulars, but it's like, the one of the reasons that he dropped down so low was because they thought he was a drug user, right? And as Bob knows, what ended up happening, and I hate to keep on bringing up as Bob knows, because again, Bob
we're just
knows
talking about our age here.
Yeah, I know, but it's like Bob knows if you go into the head coach, and at that time, in his vault, he had a drug test of Dan Marino, and it was negative.
Wow.
And it was really what ended up happening. There was a family member, I won't get into the particulars here, but a family member of Dan Marino that was actually on drugs. It wasn't Dan. And so he drops down that low because of a drug test and the fact that they thought he was on drugs, and he wasn't.
Yep.
I mean, Coach Fazio had his test in his vault all the time, and it's like, hey, I'll show it to you. It's like, he's tested negative. There's no positive test for Dan Marino, and yet the league thought it was. And I made the big push. It's like, will you go ahead and draft Dan?
And you told Dan Rooney trade Cliff Stout, and he said that's a great idea. And he took it to Noel and said, let's free up the spot for Marino and trade Cliff Stout. And Noel says, well, where'd you get that from? And Rooney goes, John Clayton. John Clayton, Bob.
He should just put GM on his title.
Oh, man.
So, John, that's a great story. Nice done. You brought it up.
How about John thinks that Rodgers is probably going to end up in Denver, Bob?
Well, I was going to ask you that because now with Tampa looking for a guy, I'm just curious what Tampa's opening does for this entire merry-go-round of quarterbacks.
Hard to tell because, and what I'm still trying to figure out, even though it looks like from what Bruce Arians says, he's going to stay at head coach, but you wonder, is he really going to stay as head coach, knowing that Brady's gone? My high school chum who went to Churchill, or actually was, it's not Churchill now, but Woodland Hills, Gronk, he may retire. It's like, okay, is this going to change things to a point where he steps down? And right now he says he's not going to step down. But, Tampa Bay, I don't know if they can afford being able to do anything, with Rodgers' salary, what they have as far as draft choices or anything else. So it's like, I think that's up in the air. That's why, you look at Denver, and Denver needs them more than anybody else. You're in the AFC. You've got all these young quarterbacks to stay competitive, and certainly Rodgers wouldn't mind going to Denver. Particularly now, it's like they keep on hiring Green Bay coaches.
Yep, that's not a coincidence.
They hired today one that he worked with, and so it's like does that mean something? And I say it does.
Yeah, I agree. John Clayton with us. John, what do the new GM and head coach? How does that affect Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota's future?
I think, it's, I'm not a big Joshy Boy McDaniels guy. So it's like, it's hard to tell because, you saw what happened when Joshy Boy went to Denver. The first thing he did is to get into an argument with Jay Cutler, and they ended up trading Jay Cutler. And then he kept getting in arguments with other players. and stuff, and those guys had to end up leaving. So it's like, one thing we know about Derek Carr, he doesn't like swearing. And of course, he worked with John Gruden. He
How did
swore all
that
the
go?
time.
Wow.
And Joshy Boy McDaniels swears a bunch, and so that may not work out real well. So it's like, I think anything can happen there. I think he's going to be able to stay, but I can't guarantee it because of Joshy Boy McDaniels going to the Raiders.
You find out new stuff when you listen to John Clayton every week right here. John, I want to ask you too, and I'm going to use Mitch Trubisky as the name, but what is the most likely scenario for the Steelers? Number one, A, selection would be draft a quarterback. B would be go with what they have and add a Trubisky or someone like him. Or C, just ignore that for now, go with what you have, and work on other items until next year.
No, I'd say right now the idea would be to draft a quarterback. Certainly, I think, even though probably nobody in the Steelers would agree with me, that you got to look at Marcus Mariota, just to see if he could be a possibility. Maybe trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, because at least that could keep you reasonably competitive. I'm not a big Mason Rudolph guy, as I think everybody knows. So, to stay with what you have, I think would be wrong. And so it's like they need to add a couple things. But again, like anything else, when you go through a quarterback change like this, it sometimes takes one or two quarterbacks, maybe three quarterback moves to get it right. But again, it's like if you have the opportunity, and that's, of course, one of the problems that the Steelers have is that by going to the playoffs and all that stuff, is that that lowers their chances of getting higher in the draft to get one of these quarterbacks in a non-quarterback type of draft. So it's like, I don't know if that can happen. Obviously, Pickett would be great to be able to get in there, and maybe they have to trade up to get Pickett. But that could be a possibility. But in the end, it's going to be difficult.
John, we get listener questions sometimes. Many of them don't make it onto the air because they're moronic, but this is actually a very good one. They were listening to what you said about Munchak, and the question is, what is the going rate in the NFL for a great offensive line coach? How much does a guy like that make ballpark per year?
I'd say probably in his case, $1.5 million, something like that, maybe $2 million. Because again, he is absolutely one of the best. A lot of the assistant coaches get $1 million contract. He's obviously better than that. And so I'd say, $1.5 million to $2 million. But if you're the Steelers, it's like, the cap's going. And again, it doesn't go against the cap, but the money thing keeps going up, so you can afford it. Pay the dude. Take care of Munchak. Get him there. He's too important because, again, you saw the problems with the offensive line last year, and he can make it so much better. Look what he did in Denver. Look what he's done in every place that he's been.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amen.
That's what happens. Another interesting dynamic is the Senior Bowl. You see Kevin Colbert down there, Brandon Hunt's down there.
Yeah.
Is Khan down there? Is he?
I don't know
that
he
left
is.
behind? He's a GM candidate.
Yeah, but
supposedly.
he's more of a the cap guy. See, I'm wondering this, John. Would they be looking at the situation as an internal hire, but a co-GM sort of tenure? In other words, use Brandon Hunt to be the guy to look at the personnel, and then Omar Khan is very good at what he does. Give him more money, and then you have kind of two guys in charge.
Well, that's one thing that even though he kind of got screwed on his interview to Chicago, because he goes to Chicago as the 14th candidate, and the next thing you know, they make the hire almost like he was heading out to the plane and flying, which of course was so unprofessional on the Chicago Bears. But hey, that's the Bears. But what I can see happening is that you can hire Omar as the GM and then have Holmes as the the personnel guy, and the two of them work together. Because again, look at it as a similar situation to Philadelphia, because you can look there and you can see that their GM, Howie Roseman, is not really a player picking GM. Mm-hmm. He's a cap guy who can run the organization and run it as a GM. And I think Omar can do that as long as you have a good personnel guy. And so it's like Holmes seems to be a good personnel guy. So it's like I think the two of them can do well together as long as they don't lose Holmes, because I know that he interviewed in San Francisco and all that stuff. So if they can keep Holmes, which they should, and have Omar as the GM, I think that's a good combination.
Hey, John, obviously the big story that you've been spending so much time paying attention to and looking into is what's going on with this Flores lawsuit, manipulation and misuse of the Rooney Rule, Dan Rooney's namesake. And then there's this accusation of bribing, incentivizing losing with this claim that Stephen Ross was giving Brian Flores $100,000 per loss, or at least wanted to. When you have asked around about that, what are people inside the NFL saying about that specific part of what Flores is claiming?
It's inexcusable. I mean, and it's something that should be, if there's any truth to it, and if Brian Flores can prove any kind of truth, which is going to be very difficult to do because it's probably just word against word, and they're going to take the word of the owner as opposed to anybody else. But if that's going to be true, I mean, you've got to talk about major sanctions coming against Stephen Ross. I don't know if you saw the other story that came out in the last 24 hours, but Hugh Jackson said that his owner came back and asked him and was offering to pay him money to lose
What
games.
are major sanctions, though, John? Would it be a suspension or
Very good follow-up
even,
question, Bob.
Yeah, or even more than that. We see Jerry Richardson, that situation was different, but still.
Let's put it this way. Have they stood by Daniel Snyder? And the answer is yes. They'll stand by Stephen Ross. They'll stand by the Cleveland owner. But what I'm talking about is that, you lose a whole bunch of draft choices. You get fined a whole bunch of money. You get so many penalties because of that, because you're cheating the game of football. You're incentivizing the idea of losing. Hey, listen, we see it in baseball with the idea that baseball teams want to lose games to get better positions in the draft and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. We've seen the Tank the Tua thing, which of course goes into what happened with the Flores situation. You can see that being part of the game itself, but you can't have it because you're cheating the sport that's there. And particularly, it's even worse now. It wasn't as worse 3 years ago in the sense that you have so many betting factors that are out there. To do this is inexcusable, and it deserves the highest amount of sanctions. And I don't know what the highest amount of sanctions can be, but if this is the case with Stephen Ross, then he deserves the highest amount of sanctions possible. Same thing in Cleveland.
And I would think, to put a bow on this, so Hugh Jackson made it sound like, Bob, you read this, Jackson made it sound like he took the money. How I read that.
You haven't heard until now, so.
So if that's the case, I think he's a college coach now. That college should fire him. If he was willing to accept that money to lose games, how do you allow for him to be the coach of your team?
Yeah, I'd have to see more information on that just to make sure that was the case, but it sounds like that is the case.
The person who runs his foundation is saying we have receipts of getting deposits for big-time money. That's not good.
If that's it, that's pretty indicting.
That's pretty bad, yeah.
So, John, let me ask you this now. With regard to Brian Flores, he has pretty much sacrificed everything here for this lawsuit and what he believes. Would he ever get a chance to coach in the NFL? Because if he's proven to be right, why wouldn't you take a chance on him?
I think he. The idea that he's suing the NFL for discrimination and things like that, it puts him kind of in that Colin Kaepernick thing, right or wrong, where it's like I think it's going to be hard for him to get a job. I could see somebody like Bill Belichick bringing him back to coach. I think of the other 31 teams, I think it's going to be hard. I know that there's still 2 jobs that he's involved with of the 5 jobs that's remaining. It'll be probably 4 by the end of the day because Jim Harbaugh is going to probably end up getting the Minnesota job, so it's going to be down to 4. Mm-hmm. But I give Flores a lot of credit for bringing up a lawsuit that does help because, again, by the end of this time, I think we still may be down to just one coach who's black keeping the head coaching job, and that's going to be Mike Tomlin because we already know that Joshy Boy McDaniels got the Raider job. You think that it's going to be New Orleans, promoting Dennis Allen, Josh McCown, whatever stupid reason down in Houston, whatever stupid reason getting the job there, and Jacksonville having no clues what they're doing. And then who knows about the Miami Dolphins? But that's now going to be a place that you got to think about staying away from.
John Clayton, John, when you get back to town, the three of us need to get together.
Love to do
Thoughts?
that,
That'd
John.
be great.
That'd
be great.
Look forward to it, John.
See
Keep
you,
up the
John.
good work, too. Outstanding.
Okay, thanks.